here we go. So let's see what comes up here. Not true.
That was more concise.
There you go. I like talking more than typing, apparently. But here we go. So this is all about Rosen Electric. And Joe, I don't want to put you on the spot, but how different is an ESOP from a co-op?
It just depends how democratic they're structured. It can be structured very democratically or not at all. So, yeah, it can be either way.
Beautiful, thank you. Make sure people have the chance to read this, but they are the largest and they do lots of different types of work. In fact, the next slide, I think we have a reference pop up first. The next slide, this is news. I think I saw a press release on this within the last week or so. 9.4 megs down in Southern California, Rosen Electric is doing. And then I've attended, it's not on this slide, but similar, in the press release that I read for this, you may have heard about several projects in the Hollister area in San Benito County, not too far from here, down just south of Santa Clara County, San Benito County, and they have various school districts down there where Rosen's been successful contracting PV installations down there as well.
Did I see on the last slide, I read ESOP?
Yeah.
Okay. That's what the SLP was looking at. Yeah.
I'm just going to ask you for your editorial comment on this otherwise informational piece. Do you think they're using employee ownership as perhaps sales, branding, and marketing?
Yeah, they have it on their website, they do. And from, I guess, the simple way to break down the difference between the employee ownership, and just full disclosure here, I think for the basic tenets of employee ownership, the management people, the non-field electricians are the primary people that would be considered owners of the corporation for all intents. With Rosen Electric, just full disclosure. I don't think there's a typical electrician like me who's showed up with a dispatch that's in their owner ranks of their company. Maybe parallels to Joe's very simple explanation, which I usually need, there's workers and there's members. So they tend to have a little bit more clear distinction between the field and the office, I believe.
And I think also some of that might be the difference between just an ESOP versus a full democratic worker-owned.
Definitely possible.
Yeah.
I may want to just make one comment. For this meeting today, I wanted to bring in a ESOP representative because I know that the owner of Sunlight Power, Gary Gerber, is investigating that. And one problem I've always personally had with it is that there was no democratic control to a regularly structured ESOP.
For people that don't know what an ESOP is,
Yeah, an ESOP is an employee stock option program where the company is essentially owned by something like a trust, and then the trust is owned by certain interested parties. It can be complicated and it's a legal thing. But anyway, so the ESOP is not normally, doesn't come normally with democratic managerial control. However, there are 3 or so democratically controlled ESOPs in the country, and those are more interesting to me personally because of the democracy.
I don't know if anybody knows, but an ESOP versus an LLC in terms of contracting in the state of California, that might be another issue to look at as well.
It's actually not at all. It's not at all about like the structure of the ownership, but rather something that keeps coming up. You know, we do solar thermal and PV, and it's a pretty significant portion of our company. I mean, so there could be pipe fitters. I mean, I'm just wondering how that works as far as, you know, not only that, part of our office employees do designs for the solar electric and solar thermal. And, you know, we do have overlap. And in addition, you know, we're doing commercial and a lot of residential work. About 60% of our jobs are residential. So, yeah, how does that work?
A lot of questions in there, and that's where things can get complex. Typically speaking, we have clear lines, more clear lines distinguishing the crafts within the house of labor and the building trades, where we have pipe fitters that typically do that type of work, and electricians typically do that type of work. Solar provides a lot of challenges for us because of that. And one of the things that we've looked at is as the industry has demanded things, I think the industry has responded. The rebate program is more mature with solar PV. Through the California Solar Initiative has certainly stoked the industry. When we started the negotiation process with CalCia, there were 35,000 projects, I shouldn't say projects, lines that on the Excel spreadsheet that backs up the California Solar Initiative. Now it's at 46,000 a year later. So that's a lot of PV projects that have went on the rebate program. And because of that, I believe solar PV and the negotiations with CalCia and trying to figure out the workforce equation is more mature in the PV arena. And in solar thermal, we have friends in the United Association of pipe fitters and plumbers and steam fitters and refrigeration fitters, and I'd like to put a comment with solar thermal installers as well. And I've had some talks with them, and they are interested in figuring out how we were able to partner with CalCia to create the solar photovoltaic installer, and I believe we could see a parallel path for solar thermal, and perhaps even mechanisms for hybrid and maybe even joint and moving back and forth if that's what the employer and workers are doing in that particular company. I think Sunlight Power is unique in how much solar thermal it does. Typically, in a lot of the solar companies that have popped up since Gary's one of the pioneers in the industry. And so solar thermal is something that this company was founded on more so than solar PV at the beginning.
I have a question about the future, since we're talking about the different kinds of alternative energy that are out there. What about wind? Do you have any thoughts on wind, particularly as related to IE?
Yeah, wind is something that we have done a lot of work with. Roseman Electric actually is the largest wind installer in the country, but usually that's the industrial size turbines that you'll see along the East Bay foothills and such, and they do a lot of those around the country as wind joins PV in its penetration in the distributed generation arena where there's smaller wind projects around. I believe what we're going to see is that wind is more going to be looked at as more of an appliance that electricians will wire as well. I think there's less, I have a lot of respect for solar PV, first of all, if I can avoid the opportunity to digress too much here. I've personally been a part of installations totaling about 3.5 megawatts. You might be familiar with some of those projects, Google, San Jose Unified School District down in San Jose, our Union Hall in San Jose as well. And I have a lot of respect for the mechanics of solar photovoltaics design. And I think that wind might be simpler, and so it might not be separated as easily as solar PV. And quite frankly, the solar industry has grown without us, and we more or less have to address the fact that the market conditions are being set as far as rates and things like that go, as far as compensation. And like I said, the rates aren't what Brian was hoping to see as far as commercial electricians' rates, but we had to have a starting point. So I think wind is going to be more so under the umbrella, because I don't think it's going to have quite the same distributed generation that solar PV does, and if it does, it's probably going to get a few years before it catches up. Okay, so there's the source for this particular quote. Let's move on. What next? What we're looking at is for you guys to know where we're at with the solar installer classification. It's been an ongoing negotiation. We have some big days coming up on the next week. The Inter Solar Show, which I went to last year, had a great time, is next week in Moscone. And we're going to have a little signing ceremony there with CalCia, Nika, and IBW business managers. And that's where we'll have the first publicly distributed copies of the agreement and wage schedules made available. And then on the 14th, goodness, I'm going backwards here, so yeah.
I believe that Monday is actually
Yeah, I was doing this last night into this morning, so I apologize if that's the error in the presentation. No, that's cool. I appreciate that. The days of the week are correct. We were excited about this. We had to slap this presentation together, and I pushed a little bit. So
if you're trying to advertise, let's get
yeah, definitely. So that'll be Monday the 12th, is when the apprenticeship standards for the solar installer classification are being delivered to the Department or Division of Apprenticeship Standards in San Francisco. They'll go from San Jose to San Francisco, and then Tuesday is the show. You're correct. certainly provide ourselves to you guys. So as the conversation goes on, if there's the interest, I can easily coordinate with Brian, and we can set something up for a future date. So I'm going to have my conclusion slide up there, and that's not showing up too well, but this is one of the mottos that more or less I'm beginning to market within our local union. We have a Green Electrical Advancements Committee that's a very active bunch of our members, and they're getting involved, and I like the concept of telling people to build local and build green and build union. So what we'd like to do is make sure that we're available to answer any questions for you guys. Matt and I can join in on those. But one thing I do want to mention before I stop here is I want to address some of the issues that have gone on in the city of San Francisco with sunlight power.
Thank you.
A lot of gestures right there, right? You've seen mechanisms of organized labor where there's been some of the ideal aspects of us having a picket versus some of the less than ideal aspects of when union workers and perhaps union electric workers have been less than polite or proper to you. And that is where I believe the guy on the street, so to speak, that's an IBW guy, really doesn't understand the big picture and how to win friends and influence people, quite candidly. And so I'm not going to defend anybody that did any wrong to you in any way, shape, or form, or made you feel any less than, okay? But I will tell you that the people that did that are acting on a sense of pride that they have in who they are and the wages and conditions that have been established in their jurisdiction, and they're upset that companies are coming in and doing types of work that they consider to be similar to the scope of their training, running pipe, pulling wire, mounting equipment. We put lights in that burn electricity. Solar panels are put in the opposite way to generate electricity in a lot of ways. And there's a lot of people in the IBW that had major issues with addressing that the industry has moved on without our top rates, without our top trainings, right? And we've had trouble processing that people don't feel as though they should pay the rates and the conditions that we've earned doing electrical work. I mean, one of the things we do as electricians, I'm a member of the National Fire Protection Association as well, is we protect personnel and property from the hazards of electricity. And that's one of the foundations of our training, and we take that very seriously. And any of you guys hear about the Macy's in San Jose that lost power? Did anybody hear anything about ties to the solar on that? At the risk of being clumsy.
Are you talking about the Target?
No, ma'am, I'm talking about the Macy's in San Jose. It hasn't made it into the media yet because it's under investigation, but our guys were called in to fix it, and SunPower installed a 308 kilowatt system on the roof of the Macy's at Oak Ridge, and they did what's called a line tap. I know there's probably just one solar thermal guy in here, but a line tap is where a connection is made on the line side of the main breaker for where the AC enters into the building system. It's a basically simple way I can say that. There's no overcurrent protection on those conductors where the line tap happens, and there's a rule, 25-foot and 10-foot tap rules, where you have to put your first circuit breaker, your first overcurrent protection device. And I went there with my camera almost like in CSI mode the day after, once I found out about it, and I was able to get in there when our guys were there, and I looked at the dynamics of the environment, and I would suggest to you that 25-foot tap rule, which is the length of the wire, was the reason why one of the particular phases, the C phase, was stretched real tight through that switchgear. And it makes a hard turn over a bus bar. You can tell I like talking about this stuff, can't you? And I'll definitely peek. And so the conductor, the A-phase conductor, as it wrapped around the C-phase conductor, was literally wrapping around the bus and in contact with that bus. And for 2 years and about 3 months, it did just fine. And eventually that insulation gave way. There was a direct short between C and A phase and a massive explosion that shut that store down for, it was an hour and 15 minutes at first.